Welcome and thank you for standing by. All participants are on a listen-only mode for the duration of today's webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and may be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the session over to your host from the U.S. Census Bureau, Maria. Maria, you may begin.
Thank you, and good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar event, Mapping Made Simple, a data.census.gov guide to maps. My name is Maria Valdesera, and I will be your host for today's webinar event, where our presenter will help you master the fundamentals of map creation on data.census.gov, including how to select and apply variables to create geographic data visualizations, creating a map from scratch, and showing you newly added functionality. Before we get started, I want to thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me today and helping to support our speaker. I'll turn things over to our presenter in just a moment, but first I have a few housekeeping items to share. So I'd like to encourage you all to make use of the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the webinar. The question and answer panel is located along the right side of your WebEx screen. If you cannot see it, you may need to click on the three dots at the bottom right to pull it up. We have a team of panelists joining us today ready to answer questions you may have related to today's topic. If you have a question related to searching for economic data on data.census.gov, mapping data on data.census.gov, please submit it through the Q&A panel. At the end of the webinar, we will go over some of those questions that were submitted through the Q&A. A quick note on the question and answer session, we will be focusing on the platform data.census.gov, so we will not be able to go in depth to address questions on the topic of survey data, the collection process, methodology, or other census products. Finally, again, we are recording the webinar today, and all materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website. Welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Tyson Weister. Welcome, Tyson.
Hey, thank you all so much for spending your afternoon with us on the webinar, Mapping Made Simple. My name is Tyson Weister. I work on the team in the enterprise dissemination. So we're responsible for data.census.gov, the microdata access tool, and our API. So you've joined this webinar today to learn more specifically about data.census.gov and how to make the most of maps. So for this next hour, what I have planned is primarily a little bit of tips and tricks that we're going to show on screen, and then live demonstration showing you how to make a map. You don't have to have any knowledge in order to take advantage of this session. We're going to start very basic, showing you how to create a map. At a high level, that's going to be quick and easy. Then we'll go into more detail so you're familiar with all of the different customization options that are available to you on the site to visualize the data. We'll show you then how to map data from more complex data sets from the American Community Survey. We'll show you how to map economic data. Those table layouts are a little bit differently, so the map options that correspond to them are a little different as well. And then the first four examples, we're going to be showing, how to make thematic maps or mapping out actual data values across different geographies. The last example is going to show you how you can leverage the maps to select your geography visually rather than selecting your geography through different lists or searches on the site. So to get started here, we're going to focus first on mapping out data or thematic mapping. And there's a few different steps that are involved in making those maps on data.census.gov. So first, you're going to want to find a table that has data you want to map. All of the maps on our site are table-based, so that means you can map out any individual cell across different geographies on our site directly. Going to the table first, you'll also want to familiarize yourself with the layout of the table. It's just going to help you better understand the options when you go to make a map. You'll want to make sure to select your geographies that you want to map across, and then you'll create your map. So these Different steps don't have to occur in this exact order. They're the order that I like to use when I go to create maps, so that's what we're going to be using today as our guideline. But of course, there's many different ways to go about doing stuff on the site, but let's follow that very basic process to get started with a high-level map. And for this example, we're going to map out the percent of the population 65 years and over across all states. So what you'll want to do is go to data.census.gov, and we're going to pull up a topic keyword. I'm going to type age in the single search bar and press enter. To run the search, this is going to give me all of the possible tables that have age data in them, and then I'll be able to create a map from the corresponding table. Now, we mentioned how it's important to add your geography. On the left-hand side, you may need to expand the filter panel, but you'll see geographies is right there at the top in the filter panel. So we'll click states, and we'll give it a moment to load. It is looking for all of the geography selections that are compatible with the topic and ultimately the table results that we've selected. So if you select something other than a geography first, it is going to take a little bit of time for the panel to load, but just know that you'll be getting options that are compatible with what you've already selected. And here we get those list of states. And what I'm looking for is that checkbox at the top, all states within the US. That's going to add it in the upper left as a selection. And then I'm going to click the X button at the top. So ultimately, we're going to create a map. I mentioned how it is helpful to familiarize yourself with the table first. And again, there's two reasons for this. And the table I'm going to choose to start is mapping out data from table DP05, ACS Demographic and Housing Estimates. So that would be a table that would likely have data on age. We see at the top of the table on the left-hand side, that first column has a variety of rows providing data for some detailed age groups. And then when we scroll a little bit further, there's a row for this table that has 65 years and over. When we go to look at the columns of the table, you can see the geographies in the column. It first provides data for Alabama. It gives you the total number of people age 65 and over in Alabama. And then when you go to the right, you can see what's nice about the data profiles is they provide percentages. So in Alabama, 18.2% of the population is age 65 and over. And as you go across, you would see the data for each of the other states you've selected in table format. So by viewing this table, we know that one, it has the data point that we want to make a map of, and two, the table layout. So it has estimates and percentages, and we familiarized ourselves with the rows of the table. So once you've got this far, you can go ahead and click Maps at the top. And 90% of the work is done for you at this point. So it has set your map to the state level boundaries. It often will zoom you into your selected area if you're looking at something more granular than all of the states in the US. And then the last thing that we would need to do is tell the system, out of all the estimates in that data table, which one do we want shown on our map? So this is where it comes in handy to make sure that we familiarized ourselves with the table layout. And on the left-hand side, before you get there, you'll want to make sure that you are still clicked into the table that has the data you want to map out. And we see the orange bar in shading for DP05. So all we need to do from here is tell the system that we want to map out, not the total percent male. We want to map out the percent of people 65 years and over. So when you click that data drop-down menu, the data variable menu at the top, it will give you all of your options for this corresponding data table. it always defaults to percentages if the table has percents. And then you see the variables are listed here in this menu that you can scroll through. These are the same exact order as they appear in the data rows of the table. So remember, we had to scroll down just a bit to get to 65 years and over. And once you click that here, we're done. So we've mapped out the percent of the population 65 years and over for each state in the US. As you zoom in, you'll notice here what this is telling you when you look at the legend on the left. States with darker shades of blue have higher percentages of their population who are age 65 and over. And you can even click an individual geography. So here, if I click Maine, it tells me that 22.9% of people in Maine are 65 years and over. So a nice way to visually digest that piece of information in a way we can do so much quicker than was available in the table format. So now that we have the basics down, let's build on this just a little bit. But to recap, wanted to highlight here your data variables that you see in the table are the same order as the data rows. So this is just a visual reinforcing that point. On the left-hand side, you see the table DP05 in the list of possible options from the data rows of the table. When you go to the variable drop-down menu in the map, these are appearing in the same order. So let's talk about how we can build on this, customize the map, change our geography, and then show you all the fun stuff you can do visually to make the map to your suiting. So let's go and change the percent 65 from all states to all counties, and then show you those nice options at the top of the map. So we're going to be working our way through ultimately all of these buttons throughout the webinar today. But for now, I'm going to start with the Clear Geos button. That's going to clear our geography selection. You'll get a pop-up confirming that you truly meant to click this. And once you confirm, you'll notice the all state selection has disappeared from the filter panel in the left. So if you changed your mind and said, hey, I'd rather map out all counties, well, first you could go ahead and make a geography selection using the panel on the left. So here I'm going to click county. We're going to be patient, remembering that it is looking for geographies that are compatible with our selection. And I see an option here for all counties within the US. So I'll go ahead and click it. It is going to be adding this as a filter in the upper left. So we'll give that a moment to process, and then we'll go back to the map view. All right, so we see the filters loaded. You'll want to click the X at the top of this panel to close it out. And then we can see the map. So sometimes people get to this step and they aren't sure why they're not seeing counties on the map, even though they've selected counties. So there's 2 steps in the process to make sure that you're able to view the map for your desired geography. So these happen independently. First, you need to make sure that you've actually selected the geography through the filter panel or the single search, and you see the geography selection in your filters in the upper left. All right, so that's step 1. The other part is that the layer of your map has to be set to the corresponding geography level that's compatible with what you've selected. So in this case, the layer that we're seeing are state boundaries. You'll want to change the layer to counties. So when you click layer and choose county, it will set your map to the county level boundaries. And then in just a moment, it's going to fill in the data for the counties because we've selected counties. So this step happened automatically when we first went to the map because we had selected our geography first and we weren't making changes when we were already in the view. So in many cases, you won't have to worry about manually changing the layer, but anytime that you've made a selection from the filter and then you're viewing the map and it's not what you expect, make sure that the layer is set to the level of geography that's compatible with what you've selected. And then on the left, remember we were clicked into table DP05 earlier, so I'm going to choose that table again. So we can map out the percent 65 and over across all counties. And we'll go ahead and click at the top, the variable menu, choose 65 and over, and notice that it's set to percent automatically. So this will allow us to visually get a lot more detail and see different areas of the country that have higher percents of their population 65 and over compared to the state level. So here we have our map updated. Again, counties in darker shades of blue have higher percent of their people age 65 and over. And notice the ranges here are, go up pretty high, all the way up to 74.1% in one of the counties. So pretty interesting way to look at the data. Moving on to some of the other options at the top, there are options for you to switch between the different data years. So thus far, we've been mapping out data from the most recent version of the American Community Survey, which is the 2023 ACS. If you wanted to look at this data historically, you could choose one of the other years, like 2022. The map will update and load for you on screen. You can also switch between ACS 1-year and 5-year estimates. We've currently been mapping out the ACS 5-year, and that truly gives us data for every county across the nation. The ACS 1-year estimates would only give you data for counties that have 65,000 people or more. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 5-year, but know that that option to switch is available to you in this view. The next thing I wanted to show you were colors and classes. So this is where you can change how your map visually looks for aesthetics. Under colors, there are all kinds of different palettes that are available to you. So I'm going to choose orange just to show you a different one. Maybe you might change a color because you personally like that color, or maybe you can visually see the difference between these shades of oranges more easily than you could between the default blues. Those are all good reasons to change the color. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit and show you an additional functionality with the color that you may have noticed. Noticed as I zoom in, you start to see some of the street lines and street labels populate on the map. So this will help you kind of understand the context. When you're clicked into colors, you can adjust the transparency. So when the transparency percentage is set to a lower percent, you're going to see more of the background base map behind the scenes. And then when you make the transparency all the way up to 100%, you would see none of the underlying base maps. So notice those street lines and street labels disappear. Increasing the transparency percentage also makes the colors of your map a lot more vibrant and robust and easier to kind of differentiate from each other. So I'm going to take that back down just a bit. Moving on to classes. So the classes refers to the options for how you want your legend broken out. So by default, if you have more than just a few geography selections, it'll typically map out to 5 natural breaks. You can change the way the legend is broken out. If you don't want natural, you can do quantile, equal interval, or you can even manually determine where you want these breaks to be. So let's say, as an example, I wanted to simplify this map a little bit. It has a lot of information with the county levels across the entire US and 5 different classes. So here I'm going to change to only 3 classes. So maybe this will give me like a high, medium, low type of interpretation of the percent of the population 65 years and over across different counties in the US. And maybe I find this easier to digest. So you can decrease or increase the number of classes that you have in your legend. And then I mentioned about being able to manually specify the breakpoints. If you wanted to do that in the classes option, you just scroll down and you'll see that these boxes are actually clickable. So if I wanted the first breakpoint to be from 2.9% to, let's say, 15%, I could specify 15 as the breakpoint. And when I click outside of the box, my legend is going to update to 15%. And then notice the next category in the legend, of course, would then start at 15.1. And maybe I want to bring this up to 25%. So where it says 24.2 on the right, you can make an edit, click outside of the box, and the legend will update automatically. Beyond those visual updates, if you would like to share your results, we have a lot of tools that are helpful. There's a share button and print. So I'm going to show you both of these. Share will give you options to share the information on social media as well as email. You'll also get the link that will take you back to this table if you were to save it for later for yourself, or send it to a colleague and load that up. It's going to take them to the map with the same geography selection. It will have the variable selected and most of your customizations saved in that view. And here we have it loaded up. Notice it's identical to what we looked at on the other screen. So I'm going to close that out. And then over the past year or so, we've also added an option to have a PDF of the map. So you can export this by clicking the print button. That is going to generate a PDF download. And what that's going to have, the first page of the PDF, is going to be optimized for printing. So that's where you're going to see your map here in a format that has all of the labels at the top, your legends included, the data sets even indicated as well. And then however this appears in terms of centering, zoom, etc., will depend on how your screen is displayed prior to clicking that print button. So if you wanted this adjusted to be more to the left or to the right in your PDF, you would want to make those adjustments, zoom in and out before you click the print button. And while we're on that vein, if you wanted to move the legend to a different part of your screen that would be reflected in the print option, you can even collapse the legend entirely if for some reason you wanted to do so as well. So we showed the first page of the map is what most people would use in the PDF. The rest are the notes that come from the corresponding data table that the map's based on. And then the last thing I wanted to point out, I'm not going to show the end result, but the GeoJSON. If you were a geographer working with different types of software where you wanted to make your own maps outside of data.census.gov, what we do have on our site is the boundary files in GeoJSON format. So if you were wanting to do so, those are now available to you on our site through GeoJSON. If you want the regular shapefile format that the Census Bureau offers, you would continue to get those separately through the Tiger Line shapefile product on census.gov. So it just depends on which format you want the boundaries in. All right, moving on, we're going to now look at a data table that's a little bit more complex. So here we're going to pay attention to not only the map variable, but also the dimension. So in terms of demographic tables, the dimensions will be different columns of the table. You will see those options reflected in the dimension section of the variable dropdown. So there's numbers in percents. We actually saw this in our last example, but anytime you have more than one option, you'll notice that the dimensions drop-down menu will be clickable and you can specify which column you want to use. So let's see this in action. And for this example, I'm also going to drill more granular in terms of geography to show you how you can visualize data. So I did a little bit of research before this and looked at Marion County, Indiana. And what I found from here is that the median income is $63,450. But what does this really look like within the county? So let's make a map of that. For this example, I'm going to choose the census tract level geography. Don't worry if you're not familiar with tracts, we're going to visually see what they look like in just a moment. So here on the live site, I'm going to click the US Census logo in the upper left and choose Advanced Search. This is going to help me select my geography as census tract on the left-hand side. You'll want to follow the prompts and make your selection. So I'm going to choose Indiana, Marion County. And then I'm going to choose all census tracts within Marion County, Indiana. We'll see it's added as a filter on the left. And there are other ways you can search these filters. So we have topics, surveys, years, codes, and geographies. Under the topics heading, what you'll see is income and poverty, and we can follow the same logic. Click through the different prompts. Once we see a checkbox that seems relevant, you'll select it and see it in the upper left. So I have a geography and topic selection. I'm going to go ahead and click search in the lower right. And again, I like to familiarize myself with the table layout to make sure it has the data we want to map, and also so we understand the different drop-down menus that are presented to us. So this third table result is American Community Survey S1903, median income in the past 12 months. Seems like it would certainly have the median income data we're looking for. Let's verify that by clicking open the table link. So anytime you get this message, don't be discouraged. There is a little link in the lower right. You may need to click it twice. You'll see the table here. And this is giving us data. We'll read the columns and rows. First, for our first census tract, it's giving us the total number of households in the first column. The second column is corresponding percentages when applicable. And then the third column is the actual median income. So this is telling us that median household income in Census Tract 3101.04 in Marion County is $70,062. And of course, we follow that across. We get the data for all of these geographies. So we know the table layout. We know this has the data we want to map. Your last step would be to click Maps at the top. On your results panel on the left, you do want to make sure you're still clicked into the table that has the data you want to map. We can see visually that the site has recognized we've selected census tracts. We're seeing census tract boundaries visually. We see it in the legend. And of course, this means that the layer was automatically set to census tract boundaries. So all is good there. What we need to do, again, is tell the system to map out median household income, not any other random data point from the table. So again, you'll click into the variable drop-down menu at the top, and here's where you can switch between the different options. So remember, we looked at the very first row of the table that had households as the row, and median income was the column. So it was the first row and the third column. That row is grayed out currently. And the reason is that we're automatically clicked into percent. So you want to be very careful when you're working with these more complex tables from demographic data sets that have multiple columns, that you're paying attention to whether you're clicked into number or percent. Depending on which one you're clicked into, you're going to get different options in the dimension dropdown. So these are your different columns of the table. Columns 1 and 3 were numerical number-based columns, and then the second column was percentage-based. So here I'll go ahead and choose the household row. And then I'll also choose, again, not the first column, but the third column. So here we have median income in dollars for all households, and our map is updated. You'll want to always look in the lower left, just make sure that the legend makes sense for the value you're trying to map out. This makes sense for median income. And as you scroll through, you can make sense of these census tract neighborhoods that you may not have known about offhand, but you can visually make sense of census tract 3302.03, see the area that it represents, and then you can even click this on the map and see that median household income for this area is $188,984. So a really helpful way for you to get more granular information to help you make decisions and just better understand the area. Right, moving on, I wanted to show how to map data from economic tables, the way that variables and dimensions appear in these tables are completely different than they are in demographic tables. So taking a moment to understand how this translates into the map variable drop-down menu is going to be helpful for us. So when we're working with economic data sets, what you're going to see in the tables is when you scroll to the far right of any economic data table, you'll see a variety of columns that are right aligned. The column header is right aligned, the variables are right aligned, or excuse me, the values are right aligned, and they provide things like number of firms, number of establishments, sales, annual payroll. They can be categorical in nature as well. All of those variables that you see in the table that are right aligned, they will appear in the list of variables at the top of the variable drop-down menu. And we currently support mapping out any continuous variable from economic tables. On the other hand, the dimensions in economic data tables, you'll see those as left-aligned columns of the table. So these also will be the first columns that are presented. So you'll see them on the left of the table. The column headers are left aligned. The values are left aligned. And what this essentially means is it's giving you the context for what you're getting data for. So in terms of the table, each unique combination of the categorical variables, these dimensions, is going to give you a data row for the table. And the way that you'll be able to specify the exact context that you want displayed for your map is by selecting them from the dimensions drop-down menus that you'll see on the map. So these menus will automatically populate based on whatever table you're clicked into, so you don't need to worry about having to create something from scratch. You just need to remember to verify what is being shown and make changes as needed. So let's take a look at this in action. In our next example, we're going to look at the total number of accommodation for NAICS 721 for all counties in Florida. So here I'm going to go back to the site. I'm going to start fresh on the landing page. For this example, I'm just going to type a table ID. It doesn't matter how you find the table that has the data you want to make a map of. And if you want more tips and tricks for that, I recommend tuning into some of our other webinars. But we have the table that has the data. Now let's add the geography, all counties in Florida. So here I'm going to click Geos. This will give you a list of all of the different levels of geography at the Census Bureau in general. If you want to know which ones are compatible with this specific table selection, if you click on Summary Levels, it will give you the handful of geographies that are specifically compatible with this one table. So right off the bat, I see 050 state, county. Follow the prompts, choosing Florida, and then all counties within Florida. You could have selected this through another method, and that would be perfectly fine as well. And again, when you see this message, don't get discouraged. In most cases, you can view the table and you'll always be able to download the data, and you can still make maps when you see that message as well. So here, just to refresh ourselves with what we're working with and what we can expect when we get to the maps, on the right side of the table, we see the ultimate data that this table's providing. It's going to tell us the number of establishments, annual payroll, first quarter payroll, and number of employees. And we get that data, the left-hand side, for different contexts. So a lot of these, at first glance, you'll think you're looking at the same thing, but eventually you'll notice that when you're looking at in the totality of these dimensions, when you look from one row to the next, you're going to see one difference somewhere. So each unique combination of these dimensions will be a data row in the table. In this case, across all counties in Florida, it's giving the data for 6,467 rows. So it's a very wieldy table. You can digest this very easily in our maps. Now that we're familiar with what we're looking at, let's click over to maps and see how it works. As we expect, we'll want to make sure we're clicked into the table on the left that we want to map out data for. We know that there were data for number of establishments and employees. We want to make sure our maps at the county level, it's zoomed us in automatically to Florida. We can visually see county boundaries. We see county in the legend. We see county in the layer. So just like the last couple examples, we need to tell the system which data point we want specified and for what context. So that's where you'll want to click the variable in the upper left. You can keep it at number of establishments. I'll go ahead and change it just for fun to number of employees. And then also you want to, especially for all of the tables and for economic tables in particular, pay attention to the dimensions and the different drop-down options that are available to you. So this is where you specify the context for what you want the number of employees shown. Do you want total number of employees working any business? We wanted specifically accommodation, so that's where you can click into the 2017 NAICS code and change it from all to accommodation. And you could find that by, oops, lost my place, by typing either 721 or accommodation into this search bar, and it's going to give you the options that are an exact text match to whatever you've typed in. So you'll want to type it in, make the selection for 721, and then notice our dimension is updated from 00, all businesses, to 721, accommodation businesses. And then if you wanted to narrow this down even further, you could certainly look at the other available dimensions, but I really want to keep it at the total of all accommodation establishments. So I'll leave it at that and look at the map. Again, this is giving us the number of employees employed in accommodation establishments by businesses that have paid employees. Counties in darker shades of blue have higher number of employees. So we could see in Orange County, 44,260 people are employees of accommodation establishments. And then what I also wanted to show here is you can switch between table and map views interchangeably. So this last button at the top of the map for table, this view that you get of the table when you're clicked into the Maps tab is going to give you just the estimate that you've mapped out across your geographies. When you scroll to the bottom, this is downloadable. So really helpful if you wanted to get the data and just have it for this one data point, rather than going back to the full table view If you were to use the download options here, you would get the full table results for this very large table. So even uses for the mapping beyond just maps, surprisingly. The last thing I wanted to show very quickly is moving away from mapping data and moving towards using this as another method to help you get to data by visually selecting your geography. So up until this point, we've been selecting our geography through lists. In the filter panel, you can use the map itself to visually select a geography. This is particularly helpful for areas that maybe you don't know offhand which geography selection you need. I use this frequently for census tracts in other areas where I'm familiar with the area, but not sure which of the geography from the list that I need. And I do want to note here, when you make selections this way, you can make selections in bulk, but the URL gets longer and longer because these are all individual selections. So I put a note here that you can select approximately 70 or fewer geographies using this method I'm going to show you. That's not a hard rule, it's a rule of thumb, and it's based on a lot of factors. But for this example, I'm going to pick some census tracts in downtown Savannah, Georgia. So going back to the live site, I'm going to click fresh from the landing page. And if you go to data.census.gov/maps, or just click the maps button here at the top, by default, you're going to be put into the selection map. So we've been making thematic maps thus far. Selection map is completely different. And what we see here is the layer. So the layer is going to be the geography that you can make selections from, or what you're going to see data for. And the map can only have one layer at a time. So here we see the default is that we're getting state level geographies. We wanted to select census tracts, so that's where you would click into layer, find the census tract option. This is available to you in this grid or list view, depending on your preference. Regardless of what view you're in, both of these are searchable. In one way or another, you'll select census tract as the layer. It is zooming us into the center of the map. So we haven't made any selection, so that's why it's kind of arbitrarily picking that. We would want to manually scroll and zoom into our area of interest. So here we're going to go to Savannah. And here we can see different tracts in Savannah. So when you're ready to make a selection, you would go ahead and click one of these tracks and click select. That's going to add it as a filter in the upper left. And this is just the same as if we had selected the census tract through the filter panel. So to go a little bit further with this, I also wanted to show you the base map and the boundaries. So at the top of the map toolbar, you'll see base map. That is the details that you see behind the scenes to help give you a little bit more reference for your map. So by default, you're going to have the basic base map that gives you some street lines and street labels. If you change it to detailed, that's going to add some color, but it's also going to tell you where different hospitals, parks, colleges, universities, military installations, and airports are. So it just gives you a little bit more information for reference purposes. And you can also, of course, make nothing as your base map if you want it gone completely. So I'm going to revert back to the basic. And then the next thing I wanted to do is I mentioned on the left-hand side, there is different table results here. So it's giving us results for every possible table. If you want to update this to just the tables that are compatible with the selection we've made, you can go ahead and click reload. And we'll give it some time, but it's going to update here for our selection. I'm going to reload that. Actually, let me go back a step. All right, sorry about that. I had lost my place. We'll go ahead and reload that one more time. Okay, so here, what it should have done the first time is narrowed it down to just the tables that are compatible with the geography we selected. So 1,279 tables that we can get data for this specific census tract for. So once you start clicking into one of the tables, you would be able to map data out for that geography. You can also continue to make additional selections. At the top of the map, there's a select tool. That's going to change our cursor from this hand icon to something else. So you have the option to draw a box, a circle, or you can turn into a cowboy, make a lasso, and have a custom shape. And anything that's fully or partially within that shape at the census tract level, when we release this click, it is going to add this to our selection. So this is where I mentioned, you do have that limitation of selecting approximately 70 geographies. So you can certainly make selections in bulk, just don't get too crazy or eventually it won't function for you. You'll get a notification if that does happen. And then the last button I wanted to show at the top is identify. Oh, there were two more. One is boundaries. So that's going to turn on different layers of your map for reference purposes. So you can choose any additional geography boundary and label to show on your map. Again, you're not going to make selections, but if we turn on place, it will tell us the different city boundaries and other places that exist. So here we kind of get that indication that yes, we are in fact in Savannah. The boundaries for places are shown in this very light, thin boundary color, and the census tracts are in the reddish purple color. And then when you click over to identify, the identify option allows you to click any area on your map, and it will tell you for that exact point that you made the click in, what boundaries that geography falls in. So this is based off of the boundaries you've chose to display prior to getting to identify, and then of course whatever's included in your layer will be shown as well. So that's telling me the point I clicked on the map is of course in census tract 33.03, but it's also telling us here in the upper right that point is part of Savannah within the city limits. As we start clicking different points, you can see the options on the right change for that geographic detailed information. So you go through all these steps, you make some selections, you maybe take advantage of some reference tools, but in the end, you maybe want to get data from our set of data tables on the site. That's where you can click over to the tables tab. It's still limited now to the 1,279 results that are compatible, and you can start accessing the table data. You could also from here narrow this list even further by adding in, let's say, a topic filter. So that's going to take us to the end of our demonstration. Notice that when this table loads, we are in fact getting data for the very census tracts that we've selected. A couple of things that I wanted to mention. We do have the selection and reference map features on data.census.gov. If you'd like a more robust reference map, you could use the Tiger Web product. Also some resources for learning more. We do have a feedback link under the single search bar that will send an email to census.data@census.gov. So we would love to hear how we can make the maps or the site in general work better for you. We also answer data questions. So if you're struggling on the site, please reach out. It will be monitored and responded to within just a couple business days. We also have email updates to keep you alert of the latest educational opportunities to help you make the most of data.census.gov. So we encourage you to visit the link or go ahead and do the QR code in the upper right and subscribe to those updates. We'll also keep you alerted of the latest system enhancements and data releases. And in that vein, we have workshops that we offer if you'd like hands-on practice. We offer these workshops at least once a month. So if you're not seeing a date and time that currently works with your schedule, we would encourage you to check back regularly, but they're on topics anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length. You're going to get someone showing you a deep dive demonstration, but you're also going to get individual exercises and time to work through it independently before coming back together as a group. We do have one on basic and advanced data.census.gov. We have one on making the most of mapping. We have a geography one that we've introduced pretty recently. And then this month, we also have brand new workshop offerings on finding American Community Survey and finding economic data in data.census.gov, the microdata access tool, and the API. So we hope to see you at one of the workshops. And at this point, I'll turn things over to Maria, and we'll be excited to take some of your questions soon that have been entered in the Q&A.
Great, and just in just a few moments, we will start going over some of the questions submitted through the Q&A panel. So if you do have a question on creating maps on the site, please feel free to submit that now. But before we dive into your questions, I did want to let you know that we've set up a quick evaluation survey that will pop up when you exit WebEx. So when you see that survey window, please take a moment to share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear what worked well, what we could do better, and especially any other topics you're interested in learning about in future webinars. Advance to the next slide, I think, or yeah, we'll go back to the contact info. Thank you, Tyson. So again, if you do have any questions remaining after our session concludes, or if you'd prefer to email us your question, feel free to reach out to any of the email inboxes listed here. If you're a member of the media, please contact the Public Information Office at PIO@census.gov. And for general data.census.gov questions from the public or for training requests, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. Okay, so we can just move on to some of the questions that we received. We have received quite a bit of questions to the Q&A panel, all great. Some may not have been within the scope of what we're covering today, but I do want to go over some of the most relevant ones. So firstly, we did go to question. It says, I frequently get asked for data at the zip code level. If that is possible with data.census.gov, please include an example when convenient and highlighted any challenges or weaknesses when drilling into that level of granularity. So I think, Tyson, if you could just briefly talk about zip code tabulation areas and what that would look like on a map, that would be great.
Yeah, so as Maria mentioned and Sam, I think, did in the written, the key thing is that if you're mapping out data from demographic surveys and programs like the American Community Survey and the Decennial Census, be sure first that you chose zip code tabulation area, not 5-digit zip code. You probably wouldn't inadvertently get clicked into the wrong one, but just noting that there are slight differences between true zip codes that mail delivery routes are based on and these zip code tabulation areas. They're generalized representations of zip codes. So the main disadvantage of using zip code areas, we'll give it some time to load up here, is that they don't completely cover the country. So there are some areas that do not have a zip code tabulation area covered from a geography standpoint. So you may find holes. I would say that's the primary challenge of using zip code areas, at least in comparison to another smaller geography like census tracts that I showed. Of course, one of the benefits of zip code areas is most people kind of have a understanding of what zip code area they likely belong to. So, that's one of the benefits of zip code areas. And it should be loading here, but I don't want to take more time on this. Just make sure to choose ZICTA.
Great. Thank you, Tyson. And we did get another question. So it says, can you overlay multiple demographic data onto one map? For instance, mapping age 65 and older and poverty rates.
So that functionality is not currently available on data.census.gov. So you have to pick one estimate from data.census.gov and map that out. If you wanted to do something like you're describing, you would need to create a map using your own software and download the data from our site. That would help you do so.
Great. And actually, there's a related question to that about downloading data. So it says, if it's not possible to upload census data into other mapping program, or if it is possible, is it possible to upload census data into other mapping programs so we can layer our data over the population? What format is it, and are most mapping softwares compatible? So I think that definitely leads in.
Great questions. I love it. So all right, oh, we have zip code areas. So it'd be easier if they were all selected. All right. When you go to the data tables, what you would do if you wanted to work with this externally is download the data. So if you see a download table button, choose that to get the statistics. And then if you're actually viewing the table, you would see different options. A lot of people choose Excel and CSV. If you want to map the data, you need the zip file format. So that's going to be machine readable output for this particular data table. It's going to include GeoIDs. And then what you would do is match up the GeoID in this file with the tiger line shape files that you would get from census.gov or the GeoJSON files you could get from our maps. And if you're referencing those files, the geography division has added a field recently to the tiger line shape files called GeoIDFQ. That means fully qualified. And that's going to match one-to-one with the GeoID from the zip data downloads in data.census.gov. So you just match those two up and merge them into GIS software, and you can do all of the creative things that you're able to do in GIS.
All right, great. I know we're coming up on that 3 o'clock time. So I do want to thank everybody for all of their questions. And if we didn't get to your question today, please, again, feel free to reach out to us. I also did put links in the chat for the email updates, the workshops, and of course, our resources page as well. But with that, I do want to turn it back over to you. And again, Tyson, and of course, again, email us at census.data@census.gov with any questions or feedback that you have for the site.
Awesome. And thanks for mentioning those resources, Maria. You will find those not only in the chat, but also when you click the help button underneath the single search bar on data.census.gov, that takes you to our whole suite of educational resources. Reminder, if you have data questions, please reach out at census.data@census.gov. And we also take training requests at the Census Bureau. If you're part of a national organization, please reach out to ced.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. But we also have local data dissemination specialists located throughout the country. They are the ones hosting this webinar today, and they also manage census.gov/academy, which is the centralized training hub for all things census data at the Census Bureau, and not just this one particular site that we covered today. So there is one data dissemination specialist assigned to your state, and if you'd like to request a training from your local staff member, those are available to you at census.askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. Thank you all so much for joining this today, and we hope to continue the conversation and see you all in future trainings.
That concludes today's webinar. You may disconnect at this time. Have a good afternoon, everyone.